If you're taking the LSAT in 2025 or beyond, you've already caught a lucky break because logic games are off the test. That means there's less material for you to study. But scoring a 175 or above still requires discipline, focus, and a plan that actually works. So today, I'm going to walk you through the exact step-by-step system that I would use if I were taking the LSAT today. It's the same one I used to go from a 152 to a 175, and I've used it with thousands of students over the past 20 years. The framework is the LASER approach to LSAT prep. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review, and each step builds on the last. If you skip one, the whole system starts to wobble. But if you follow it, you've got a clear roadmap to scoring a 175 and above. The first phase, again, is learning. This is where most people either set themselves up for success or they waste months spinning their wheels. Before you touch a timer, before you do a practice test, before you even think about scoring in the 175 plus range, you've got to understand the LSAT. Not just what's on it, but how the test makers think. Because the LSAT isn't testing whether you're smart, it's testing whether you can spot faulty logic, recognize vague language, read dense, boring text under pressure, and make fast, strategic decisions with incomplete information. Most students think studying means reading a prep book, memorizing a bunch of question types, and diving into problems. But that's like trying to build a house before you've poured the foundation. What actually works is understanding the structure of the test first. There are 2 scored sections of logical reasoning and 1 scored section of reading comp, which means logical reasoning is the heart of the test. This is where you see short arguments, and your job is to analyze each one, find the underlying assumptions, fix the flaws, and draw conclusions. Reading comprehension gives you long, dense passages on topics that you definitely did not choose. You need to read critically and understand the arguments across multiple paragraphs. You also get an extra section of either logical reasoning or reading comp, and then, of course, the unscored writing sample. But your priority should be, first and foremost, master logical reasoning because it is 2/3 of the scored portions of the LSAT, meaning that's where most of your score comes from, and it's the most learnable section once you learn how it works. Now, in logical reasoning alone, there are about 15 different types of questions. Each one tests a specific type of thinking. Some might ask you to weaken an argument, others want you to draw a conclusion, spot an assumption, or identify a flaw. Now, you don't want to just memorize the names of the types here. You want to ask yourself, what is this question type actually testing? What kind of thought process do I need in order to solve it? And what traps are the test makers laying for me here? This mindset shift, moving from which answer is right to how is this question trying to trick me, will change the entire nature of your prep. Now, here's a truth about the LSAT you're going to learn pretty fast. The LSAT loves predictable patterns. They like to use the same logical fallacies over and over again. The test makers love vague terms, scope shifts, cause and effect traps, and misleading answer choices that might sound good, but they collapse under strict scrutiny. Now, it's not enough to recognize these in hindsight. You've got to train your brain to expect them before you go in. And this all starts in the learning phase of your prep. You've got to spend plenty of time with real LSAT questions, not just explanations and not just theory. You've got to break them down, pause after each one you do and ask yourself, what is the structure of the argument? What's the conclusion? What evidence are they using? And where is the logical gap? You've got to become fluent in the language of the LSAT, LSATese, I might put it. Now, of course, everyone learns differently. Some people love reading, others need visuals, some need to talk things out. So you've got to ask yourself, what kind of learner are you? If you learn best by reading, you might want to grab a high-quality LSAT textbook, but don't go it alone throughout your journey because you will need feedback eventually. If you prefer watching and listening, you might benefit from on-demand video lessons that walk you through question types, logic concepts, and real examples. If you're interested in finding out more, check out the links below this video. We have plenty of resources available to you beyond what you're going to see here on the YouTube channel. Now, if you need real-time support, a live class or semi-private small group sessions might be your best bet, where you can ask questions, get personalized help, and avoid common misunderstandings. Again, check out the links below this video. We have plenty of support to help you there in exactly that context. Now, of course, There is no one right format here. As long as it's helping you truly understand the logic, not just memorize tips, you're going to be in good shape. But if you're switching formats every single week, jumping from Reddit to YouTube to TikTok, that's a major red flag. Stick to one or two trusted sources and go deep with them, not wide. Now, the basics of logical reasoning are your core. That's where you want to start off. You want to learn the components of an argument, the conclusion, the premises, and assumptions. The conclusion is basically the major point they are trying to prove. The premises are the evidence supporting that conclusion, and the assumptions are the underlying or unstated premises of the argument. You want to practice identifying each piece of the argument over and over. And it may feel slow at first, but that's okay. You're not training to go fast just yet. You're training to go about it the right way. Now, of course, you don't want to skip or neglect reading comp, even if you think you're the kind of person who's bad at reading, or even if you think that you're good at reading. Regardless, a lot of students ignore reading comp, especially in the beginning of their prep. They think to themselves, I'll just figure it out later. How hard could it actually be? Then they get blindsided by a 500-word passage on quantum physics, 18th century feminism, or obscure legal theory, and then they panic under time pressure. So you want to start now. Even if it's just reading one passage a week and summarizing the main point, the author's attitude, and the structure, you're building a tolerance for dense, boring writing and training your brain to stay focused even when you don't care about the topic. That's a skill itself, and it takes time. Of course, you want to skip logic games because the LSAT no longer includes them. Don't waste a second studying them. Don't make the mistake of using some outdated prep book where they're still being included, because that section is gone and completely removed from the test. Make sure the resources you are using are up to date with the current LSAT format. Now, by the time you finish the learning phase of your prep, you should be able to look at a logical reasoning question and quickly ID which type it is. You should be able to break down any short argument into both the conclusion and the evidence. You should be able to spot common logical fallacies. You should be able to read reading comp passages without zoning out or getting lost entirely. And you should be able to explain the why, the reason, behind the right and the wrong answer choices. Of course, you're not going to be perfect and it won't be fast, but that's okay. That's not the goal here. The goal is understanding, because when your foundation is solid, every other phase, accuracy, sections, exams, and review will become 10 times easier. Now that you've built your foundation, it's time to start executing with phase 2, accuracy. This is where you move from learning about the LSAT to actually training your brain to beat it. You're no longer watching from the sidelines. Now you're getting on the field. And the key to getting better fast is to avoid doing random practice, to avoid just taking more time sections, and to avoid chasing a score. Instead, drill one question type at a time with complete focus until it becomes second nature. Now, of course, most students don't train this way. They jump around. They do full sections and full exams to just see what happens. They hope that by doing enough questions, improvement will magically occur. But that's like practicing the piano by playing random songs every day. You might feel productive, but you're not building real skill. However, when you drill by question type, you isolate one kind of logic at a time. It's like weightlifting with perfect form. You build accuracy, you build confidence, you recognize patterns faster, and you stop falling for the same old traps. Of course, logical reasoning should still be your number one priority because it's the biggest section of the test. It shows up twice, and it rewards pattern recognition like no other. You want to start by drilling the 3 most common LSAT question types: necessary assumption, flaw, and inference. Even if you're just decent at them, your score will jump. Now, here's how to drill them right. First, you want to choose maybe 10, 20 questions of a single type. Don't mix types, just focus on one. You want to do them untimed, but focused. Speed doesn't matter yet. What matters is understanding. You want to understand, what is the question really asking? What kind of argument are they using? And why is the right answer right? And why are the wrong ones wrong? Don't move on until you can explain that clearly in your own words. That explanation process is where the real progress happens. Then you want to spot the patterns and create your own cheat sheet. After every 10 or 15 questions, pause and ask yourself, What do these questions have in common? What trap answers keep showing up? And what strategy is working for me consistently? You're not just solving problems here, you're learning how to spot the setup. Eventually, you'll see a necessary assumption question and you're going to know, okay, it's time to find the one answer that must be true in order for the argument to work. Then write down what works. Create your own playbook. You don't need to memorize some test prep company's list of tips. Your own patterns will be more useful for you. Now, when you get a question wrong or you feel unsure, don't just read an explanation and nod along. Ask yourself, what was tempting about the wrong answer that I picked? What made the right answer seem wrong at first? And what assumption did I make that wasn't actually in the argument? Here you are reverse engineering your own thought process. You're figuring out why you made the mistake so you don't make it again. And that's the real goal of this phase. You want to train your brain to think like the LSAT test makers. Now, as for when to move on, the rule of thumb is once you're consistently scoring 80% or better on a given question type without rushing, and you can explain your reasoning clearly, that's a good time to move on. That's when you start layering in less frequent question types like rule of statement, strength and weaken, and principle questions. These won't show up as much as necessary assumption, inference, and flaw, but once you've nailed the core types, the logic behind the others becomes easier to learn. And again, don't ignore reading comp. Reading comp, you're not going to drill by type the same way, but instead, you're going to look for patterns in passage structure and traps in the questions. You start with one passage at a time, untimed, then you ask yourself, what was the author's main point? What attitude or tone do they take? And how was the passage organized? And what do the wrong answers have in common? You're going to start noticing that the LSAT loves putting tempting, too specific, or slightly off answers right before the correct one. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Now, don't let the frustration derail you here because this is going to be the most mentally demanding phase. You'll feel stuck at time. You'll think to yourself, I've done 40 necessary assumption questions. Why am I still missing some? The answer is because that's normal. You're unlearning years of bad academic habits and replacing them with a new kind of thinking. And that takes time. You're building muscle memory here. The goal is not to be perfect. It's to be accurate and aware of where you're not yet accurate so that you know exactly what to fix. Again, for phase 2, by the end of this phase, you should be able to recognize the most common question types on site. You should be able to spot patterns in wrong answers and explain your reasoning clearly even when you're missing something. Now, this phase is where most students do start seeing real progress, but it's also where most students quit too early because they're not seeing instant results. Don't make that mistake. This is the phase where everything clicks later, but only if you put the work in now. Now, finally, we're on to phase 3, sections will be adding timing. You've already built the foundation. You've trained your brain to think like the LSAT. Now we're adding real pressure. We're no longer doing questions on the couch while Netflix is playing in the background. The clock is ticking. And as a result, your anxiety may be rising. So here is where timing and decision-making matter. And what you got to know is that success on test day doesn't come from getting every single question right, but it comes from knowing which questions to spend your time on and which to flag and skip. So this phase is all about building your pacing strategy, learning how to manage your mental energy, and building your section-level stamina. Most students start doing full 35-minute sections, hoping they'll just get faster. And they end up, as a result, rushing through questions they don't fully understand. Then they panic when they fall behind the clock and finish with a couple of guesses and think to themselves, I've got to be quicker. That approach doesn't work. It just reinforces bad habits. What you've got to do is start with one section at a time. One 35-minute timed section, either logical reasoning or reading comp, your choice. But we are not yet moving into full-length exams just yet. Your goal is not to survive 4 sections, it's to master one section at a time. So now you're training for better time management, recognizing when to move on, and keeping your cool under pressure. A general rule of thumb I like is 10 in 10 for logical reasoning. That means you're trying to finish the first 10 logical reasoning questions in just 10 minutes because These first 10 are usually the easiest. You want to knock them out quickly and confidently to create a time bank or cushion for the harder questions that are going to come later. Do not waste 2 to 3 minutes early in the section debating of which of two similar answer choices feels better. If a question's taking too long, flag it, skip it, and move on. And that might be the single most important skill in this phase. Not every question is worth your time the first time around. If you hit a question that's extra long, too confusing, or on a topic that makes your brain shut down, maybe science or moral philosophy, don't push through, don't freeze, just flag it and move on. Aim to skip maybe 3 to 4 questions per section on your first pass. Then, when you've got 3 to 5 minutes left at the end, you come back to them. Because now, you're calmer, you already have the confidence and security of knowing that you've answered the rest of them, so you're no longer panicking about time. You now have the space to think clearly. And that mental reset often helps you get these hard questions right without destroying your performance on the rest of the section. Now, you can also adapt this strategy for reading comp. Same principle, different format. Of course, reading comp passages can vary wildly in difficulty, so your job is to ID the easier two, do those first, and save the harder ones for later. The order that you do them in does not matter. LSAT does not reward you for doing them in order, it just rewards getting points. And so you want to front load your section with what you're good at and create that same time cushion or time bank. And yes, you can flag tricky questions in reading comp too, especially the ones that seem to ask about the purpose of a particular line or phrase. Those can burn 2 or 3 minutes easily if you're not careful. Now, after every time section you do, you want to track your raw score, the number of questions you guessed on, the time that you spent per question, and you can estimate here if you need to. You want to track which ones you flagged and where you lost time or momentum. You are not just practicing here, you are diagnosing your habits. For example, if you're always missing questions 18 to 22 in logical reasoning, maybe you're spending too much time early and then you're rushing later. Now, if you're finishing reading comp but missing most of the last passage, maybe you're too mentally fatigued by that point. So you can see here, the solution isn't always to just get faster. Sometimes it's reorder the section or skip questions earlier. But you're not going to know what you should do unless you track the data. Now, most students go from doing untimed drills to jumping into timed full exams way too fast. That is a huge mistake. Instead, you want to do one individual section at a time. Then you graduate to doing 2 timed sections back to back, then 3 timed sections, then full 4 section exams, which we'll get to in a few minutes. Now, if you're exhausted after just 2 sections, don't tough it out. That is not yet the goal. You want to build your endurance gradually with intention, like an athlete, not a last-minute crammer. Now, by the time you finish phase 3 sections, you should be able to finish a full logical reasoning or reading comp section within 35 minutes without rushing or panicking. You should know which questions to skip and when to skip them. You should be able to maintain focus and accuracy across the entire section, and you should be able to track where you're losing time and adjust your pacing strategy accordingly. Finally, you should start building the stamina to be able to handle more than 2 sections in a row. You are no longer just solving questions here. You are managing your time, your energy, and your mindset under pressure. That is what top scorers do differently, and that's what separates a 165 from a 175. And once you've got this down, you're ready to move on to the next level, simulating full exams under real test day conditions. So now we're on to phase 4, exams and endurance with full-length practice tests, because by now you've trained your logic, you've built up your accuracy, and you've mastered timing across individual sections. Now we're going full throttle because the LSAT isn't just about logic or speed. It's about stamina. It's about whether you can stay focused for more than 2 hours straight and keep your cool when fatigue hits during section 4. And even whether you can handle an extra unscored section that might feel off, but still deliver a 175 plus level performance. That's what this phase is for, and this is where we stop training in pieces and pull together for the full experience. Ideally, You want to have done at least 10 full-length timed exams before test day, not 3, not 5, but 10, so that test day itself will feel like just another run-through, because test day nerves are real. Energy dips are real. You want test day to feel familiar, not like a one-time performance you're hoping to survive. Treat this like a sport, where game day is not your first full-speed run because you'll have done it all before through those practices, through those simulations. Now, you want to recreate the real test environment for every practice test that you do. You want to take them like the real thing, 4 sections total, including 2 logical reasonings, 1 reading comp, and 1 unscored extra section of either reasoning or reading comp. And of course, you want to do them on the computer using Law Hub, not a textbook, not a phone app, not a tablet, but on the computer, ideally the same device you'll use on your actual test day. Now, you only get 1 break in the middle of the exam between sections 2 and 3. That's it. So you're doing 2 sections back to back, 10-minute break, 2 more sections, and that's the test. No distractions, no phone, no music, no pausing to get a snack, no chatting with your roommate or your family or significant other, just like the real thing. And you're ideally going to do it at the same time that you'll take the official exam. Because you're not just testing logic anymore, you're testing how your body and brain can handle the whole shebang. Now, you also want to use a structured review system after each exam that you take, and I'll get into more on that in a few minutes. But bottom line, after each exam that you take, don't jump straight to the score. I know it's tempting, but this phase here is not about chasing a number. It's about collecting data. After you complete each test, note your raw score, your scaled score, your score per section, how you felt during each section, what was your energy level, your focus, and your confidence, any questions you guessed on, where you flagged or felt unsure, and what threw you off, if anything. Was it timing? Was it fatigue? Was it difficulty of the question? All of this will serve as fuel for Phase 5 review. The smarter your reflection post-test, the more you'll get out of every test that you take. You also want to space out those 10 exams intentionally. Don't try to cram them all into only 2 weeks. That's like lifting weights every single day with no days off. You're going to burn out or you'll plateau fast. Instead, do 1 full exam every 4 to 7 days. Then spend the next 2 to 3 days reviewing it thoroughly. And then on the off days, you're going back to targeted drills or weaker question types. Now, it might sound small, but test day routine is actually huge, so you want to practice that as well. Every practice test you take is like a dress rehearsal. So you want to do things like waking up at the same time as you will on test day, eat the same breakfast, use the same type of scratch paper, and practice your break routine, whether you're going to the bathroom, getting a snack, or doing some breathing exercises. And that's all because predictability lowers anxiety. If your brain knows exactly what's coming on test day, it frees up that mental bandwidth to focus on the questions, not the logistics. Now, you also want to simulate curveballs because things can and do go wrong sometimes. You might get a weird extra section, your internet might cut out, or you might have trouble focusing during section 3. So you want to train for all of that too. You can build up your endurance by occasionally taking a 5-section exam so that 4 sections feels easier in comparison. You could also switch up the order of the sections so that you're not always getting logical reasoning or reading comp first. And you could try 1 exam with no coffee prior or with minimal sleep. Not ideal, of course, but that is definitely realistic because you're not just studying for the LSAT, you're studying for anything the LSAT might throw at you. Now, you might experience fluctuations or where your scores start dipping, and this happens a lot, more often than you might think, where you're crushing timed sections, you start doing full exams, but your scores drop. That is totally normal. That means you're now dealing with fatigue, maybe some burnout, maybe pressures. Don't panic. Don't abandon what's working. Instead, go back to your review notes. Ask yourself, did I bomb a single section and lose 5 points? If so, why? Was it timing? Was it my energy? Or was it the logic of the questions? Is there some systemic pattern that's showing up in my performance? Here, you're collecting intel, not just measuring results. And all of that's useful for Phase 5 review, which we'll get to in just a few minutes. But to recap here, by the end of Phase 4 exams, you should be able to complete a full, timed 4-section exam on the computer under test day conditions without crashing, without burning out. You should know your energy levels and whether to push or to pause. You should be able to ID performance trends like, I'm always dropping on section 3, if so, I can fix that. You should be building up your confidence through experience so that test day will feel routine, and you should be able to complete 10 high-quality, full-length exams and reviews under your belt before your official LSAT test day. Now, I know taking full exams is not glamorous, it's not fun, you're not learning anything new, so you might think, but this is where real-world performance is built. And once you've got that performance data, you're ready to cash in by fixing every leak in your strategy during Phase 5 review. Now, review is the most overlooked phase in LSAT prep, the one that almost nobody takes seriously. But it's the phase that separates those who plateau in the 160s from those who break through into the 170s. Because here's the truth. Doing full exams does not raise your score alone, but reviewing them correctly does. So if you're just taking test after test, checking your score and moving on, you're not studying, you're just grinding with no benefit. In this phase, you become your own LSAT coach. You dissect your decision-making process, you find the patterns, and you fix them permanently. The first step is to stop immediately checking your score. This is hard, but it's also important. Do not check your score immediately after finishing a full test, because the moment you see your score, good or bad, you stop thinking critically. You get emotional. You think to yourself, I bombed this, I thought I was doing better, or I always screw up reading comp. None of that is helpful. Instead, ask yourself, how did I feel during the test? Which sections felt easy, rushed, confusing, or maybe smooth? Did I feel fatigue at a certain point? Or where did my focus drop? You want to write all of this down before you score yourself. This gives you an honest picture of your mental game. Then you want to use the Socratic review method, and that's where the real work happens. The Socratic review method means investigating your thinking, not just marking things right or wrong. You want to start with 3 types of questions here. The questions you got right, but felt unsure about, the questions you got wrong, and the questions you guessed on or spent more than 2 minutes thinking about. For each one, ask yourself, what was tempting about the wrong answer? What made the right answer seem wrong at first? Did I misread something? And what skill or concept was I missing? You want to retrace your thought process from the moment you read the question to the second you picked your answer. This might feel slow, and it is, but it's how you fix bad habits by getting to the root cause. Because not every wrong answer is created equal. You've got to understand the reason behind each one. You might have misread the question type, misunderstood the argument structure, overthought and second-guessed yourself. Maybe you got seduced by trap language. Maybe you ran out of time and guessed. Or maybe you didn't fully understand the passage. You want to write down which category applies to each mistake. After you review 10 or 20 questions, you'll start seeing patterns. And that is your gold mine. If you notice that more than half of your wrong answers are caused by misreading the question stem, boom, now you know exactly what to fix next time. Now, if you're not already tracking your progress with a spreadsheet or a review log, start now. You want to include the test number, the section breakdown, your score, the questions that you flagged or guessed on, the types of mistakes that you made, and your key takeaways. This is how you shift from reacting to being results-oriented by acting on the patterns that you have. You're no longer saying here, I hope I do better next time. You're saying, I saw this issue last time, I worked on it, and here's how I improved as a result. That's how you build a score, not just hope for one. Now, once you know what your leaks are, it's time to patch them up. Let's say you missed 3 flaw questions because you forgot how to spot causal reasoning errors. The solution is some mini drills where you do maybe 5-10 flaw questions. Or let's say, what if you were struggling on a reading comp passage with multiple viewpoints? You want to reread that passage and map out the structure. Or what if, for example, you were getting baited by extreme language in logical reasoning answer choices? You want to practice spotting extreme words like always, never, must, and cannot in answer choices. The next time that same issue shows up, you're going to be ready because you have got it down to the root cause. Now, as test day approaches, it's time to train your mindset like an athlete. This phase is not just about the logic of the questions, it's about mental resilience. Most people who score 175 and above aren't perfect. They do still miss a couple of questions. But what they don't do is spiral. They don't waste time panicking about one bad section. They don't cling to the idea that they have to get every question right. They stay calm, they adjust, and they play the long game. Every time you review questions, ask yourself, what thought process is helping me stay focused? Where did I lose discipline, and how can I prevent that going forward? What habits do I want to keep doing going forward? You're not just building skills here, you're building your identity as someone who can crush the LSAT. Now, by the end of Phase 5, you should be able to diagnose why you missed a question, not just that you did, recognize your patterns, have a system for tracking scores, weak points, and improvements. You should be able to know exactly what skills to drill between exams and review any question like a coach, not a panicked test taker. This is the phase that makes the other 4 phases actually work. Because what separates elite performers is not that they don't make mistakes, it's that they know exactly how to fix them. Now, this 5-phase system works, not because it's trendy, not because it sounds good, but because it's been battle-tested with thousands of students over the past 20 years. No fluff, no shortcuts, just a clear, proven path to help you learn the test cold, drill with ruthless focus, master your pacing, simulate real pressure, and fix what's actually broken. Most people skip at least one of these and wonder why their scores don't move. Now, you don't have that excuse. You know the process, you know the phases, and you know what to do next, so it's time to get back to work.